Welcome everyone to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipschutz, a senior producer at Lee and co-host of the program with Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. But first, an important disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are a fusion of professional critique and passionate fandom. While Bruce's experience and my dedication to the couch may suggest an odd pairing, it's what makes this podcast a delightful mix of the expected and the unexpected. Listener discretion is advised, and an important addendum to that, Bruce, no animals were harmed during the recording of this episode.
Where did you get that?
Chat GPT.
Is this what we're facing? Is it the future?
Oh, man, it wrote a lot more than that.
First of all, we're out of jobs. That's what happens if that thing happens, right?
Man, I was thinking, we were talking about this episode a week ago, and I said, it might be fun to have a disclaimer, and I'm sitting there like, what kind of disclaimer would we have for us?
Hey, we can say whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I tell you, I hate this. When somebody gets a bad review, and they go, what do critics know? Who are critics? Well, a critic is somebody who probably watches a lot of what you do and has an idea about what is good and what isn't good. And so listen to them. But I've always said to them, anybody who pays money for something is a critic and is entitled to an opinion. So have at it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think it's like anything else where maybe, you're a critic, you're doing it professionally, but you're still a human being that needs to entertain yourself. And if something's good or something's bad, I mean, it is what it is.
And I think you do need to be a fan to be a critic. Otherwise, if you hated the medium that you were criticizing, you wouldn't do it. Right? So there is that element. But there are those who are like greasy. They're a little over the top with oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. How many times have you read quotes from some movie ad that says, this is the best thing since Gone with the Wind? Or, and you go, really? I don't think it was. Or truth should be this great. It's like, what are you saying?
Right.
But those are the things that you find, and they're quotable. So that they try to do. A lot of those, when you look at reviews that are pulled or quoted, those are written to get quoted. Because the critic who is saying, I can't believe movies have gotten this good, wants to get his name in the ad so that then it helps boost his position as a critic and helps get the name out about the publication. So this podcast, incredible. 4 stars.
I think the one nice thing, though, about the modern criticism in any form, whether it's music or TV or movies or whatever you're following, the internet has opened up all new avenues, right? Because in the old days, you might pick up your Sioux City Journal and you would just have Bruce Miller, the one telling you, or if you're in Chicago, you might have Siskel and Ebert or wherever you might be. You just have that local voice, but now you can go to Rotten Tomatoes where it's picking up the aggregate. And sure, the folks in the industry might not want to hear what a critic has to say, but when you go to like a Rotten Tomatoes and you've got 300 critics saying your movie's terrible, it's probably stinky. It probably is not good.
Well, that's really encouraging, isn't it?
Isn't it? But it goes the other way, too, where if you've got 300 critics that love it and it's, certified fresh by Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah,
right.
That's great. And then you get the weird ones where, the critics will love it and then the fans dog on it or vice versa. And then you just bang your head on the wall and don't know what to do.
Ultimately, you are your best critic.
Absolutely. Did
we offend anybody in the process of that? And did we or whatever our disclaimer said? I don't know.
All I know is no animals have been harmed in the filming of this episode.
So we're good. We're good. We're going to talk about something that I think is just very fascinating. Do you know how many years in the Academy Awards have not had an actor nominee who was based on an actual person.
Wow.
How many years out of, I think it's 95 years, have not had, how many?
I was just going to guess like 3.
8. There
8,
are
wow.
years. And look at last year, we had Elvis. We had Marilyn Monroe. The Fabelmans could be considered based in,
Sort of, yeah.
So there are those. So it's a sure way to an Oscar, is to play somebody who actually exists.
Yeah.
And there were the most at 12 in 2018. Isn't that unbelievable? It's
That's crazy.
Wow, we're just grabbing anything we can, throwing it up on the screen and say, hey, it's based in fact. So that's a surprise to me. But it is sure content. You will know that there is some story to base it on. We saw now recently with The Blind Side where Michael Oher is just kind of like, no, this isn't what I remember. So he's trying to speak against this as the ultimate. And it's never, ever, ever in the history of filmmaking is a film an absolutely accurate depiction of what happened.
Right, because it's not a document. Right, it's not a documentary.
Even that with documentaries,
right,
you can't trust them.
No,
I remember. This tells you how far back we go. Okay, I did a master's thesis on the validity of critics. It's like, do critics make a difference? Is basically the thesis that I did. And we looked back, and there was like this sliver of time when actually critics would have any kind of impact on an audience. And what it was in those days, they were showing what like people were like, Eskimos were like. And people had never seen Eskimos. So they believed exactly what they saw on the screen and said, that is exactly the way it is, even though it may not have been. So, and it was just a very sliver of time that critics could have some kind of impact on what people saw. After that, don't make a difference at all.
People just kind of watch something and
yeah.
And you see that even now with like Netflix, where movies that bomb at the box office, but all of a sudden they'll be trending on Netflix. You'll see like, what's that most popular? And it'll be some movie from 7 years ago that nobody went to see, all of a sudden gets hot because it's just people for some, whatever reason, an algorithm, and then it catches fire.
Yeah. Well, look at Green Book. Green Book won Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And critics were like kind of lukewarm on it as a movie. And the people who were related to the man portrayed said, it isn't his life. This isn't all at all what it was like.
Right.
But it played well because it kind of touched those heartstrings that we were looking to touch. And so they may do something to you emotionally, but they may not do it realistically.
Yeah. And you talked about these dramatizations, but it's even in documentaries, the storytelling can be twisted in a way to help tell a narrative. And one that I wanted to bring up because the person that was featured in it just died recently, Sixto Rodriguez, who was a musician out of Detroit. He released 2 albums and they didn't do very well commercially, and he got dropped by his label and he kind of fell into obscurity, and he got popular in South Africa during apartheid when the country was basically cut off from civilization. There's no internet at the time, so there's no way of researching, and this mythology was built about the Sugar Man, and this documentary, Searching for the Sugar Man, it won an Oscar for Best Documentary. But even in that case, it failed to mention that he had like these small pockets of international fame. It wasn't, he never achieved some level of glory and made tons and tons of money. But in the late 70s, early 80s, Rodriguez was actually touring in Australia. And that was before they discovered, he was alive in South Africa. So even in that case where you have a story, it's a documentary, it's interviewing the real person, there's no actors involved, it's supposed to be reality, they kind of fudged with reality a little bit just to tell the story of, here's this person that's completely obscure, even though in Australia they knew exactly who he was because he had been there a few times.
Sure. Yeah, well, look at the film that's leading the way this year for Best Picture, Oppenheimer.
Right.
Now that looks about as clean as you can get, except for some of those scenes that are kind of done in the mind, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the artistry of the director, so you're not getting this. And we've got other ones coming this year. We had Air, which was about the Michael Jordan selling of Nike. Napoleon is coming up. Ferrari is coming up. Priscilla, about Elvis Presley's wife. So there are the Killers of the Flower Moon, which you were waiting for.
Right.
Now, all these are based in fact for some reason, and it's a jumping off point is what it amounts to. Reality becomes a starting point, but not necessarily an end point.
Right. And we saw this also in a series on HBO that just wrapped this past weekend, Winning Time, which looked at the rise of the Lakers dynasty in Los Angeles. And a year ago, there was a lot of controversy after season 1. Jerry West, who was portrayed in it, was very unhappy with his portrayal in the show, and basically making him look like this crazed lunatic, and he's not true, and he wasn't like it. And then season 2 comes along, and of course they're opening it up with this disclaimer that this is a dramatization. Some of the characters have been changed. And what I found myself doing through the every single episode that I watched, something would happen, and I was immediately on my phone
looking.
Is it because one of the things near the end was this lawsuit by a wife of Dr. Jerry Buss, who's trying to take the team from him. It's like, well, who is this person? And I'm kind of Googling it, and person's not really a real person. It's sort of a fictionalization of another person. And so it's those little things like that they're introducing. But on the flip side, you have Jerry West, who was very unhappy with it. But I read I think it was in Vulture, they were talking to the folks behind the series, and they said they showed the episodes to Jeannie Buss, Jerry Buss's daughter, who's portrayed in it, and she loved the series, and she felt a connection to her father again, who had passed away a number of years ago. So she really enjoyed watching the show because it kind of, rekindled those memories of kind of growing up in that time. So it's I guess, how you're being portrayed and in what way and whatnot. But, that was kind of an interesting one from that perspective.
We have this year Weird, about Weird Al Yankovic, and it's so off the beam. It's not at all what his life was like. He was participating in it. So he, if you will, signed off on it.
Right.
Elvis had Priscilla as kind of their guider throughout all of this, and it was nominated for Best Picture last year. Now this year, Priscilla is probably going to be nominated, and Priscilla is talking. So she's rewriting the narrative of Elvis Presley just by what she'll allow or what she won't allow in the story. So that's interesting. But there are duds. There are duds that didn't really work. Can you think of movies where you thought, oh my God, that's just terrible? That one doesn't cut it. And I think one that people always mention is John Travolta as Gotti.
Oh, that was
a real stinker.
That
right?
was so bad. Yeah.
Ashton Kutcher as Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Not much there.
No.
Michael Douglas as John Belushi in Wired. Now, somebody didn't like Jerry Lee Lewis, portrayed by Dennis Quaid in Great Balls of Fire. But I got to tell you, I interviewed Jerry Lee Lewis about this, and he loved it. He thought he captured every bit of him. So, it's all perspective. If it's my life, come on, Brad Pitt's playing. I'm telling you that right now.
Right.
And there's no way that I am remotely in the same ballpark as Brad Pitt, but they get a chance to kind of rewrite their own history by having control over who plays them.
Yeah.
You have play you. Who would you pick?
I don't know.
You would pick better. You're not going to say, oh, I'm going to take, I don't even want to name names, but you're going to pick. So you say George Clooney's going to play me, of course.
It would probably be Clooney. You're right.
Right. And
we look the
together,
Yeah,
Brad
he's a
Pitt
little
and
older.
George Clooney were there.
You mentioned Brad Pitt. He was on Dave, the last season of Dave, portraying himself, but it was a fictionalized version of himself.
And that was so good.
Right.
So he was so good because you even felt the kind of like tension that he had in that situation, because I don't want to spoil it, but there's this nutty person in the house,
Right.
and Brad Pitt is in the house, and Dave is in the house, and you've got to figure, how do we get out of the house?
Yeah. There was that scene too where he says, "Well, you can call me," and I can't remember what the name was. He's like, "Well, that's really what my name is." And again, I'm on Google, like, is that really his name? It's not. It's just he fictionalized the fictional name, which is comical.
And it doesn't always work. Like I say, there are situations where you go, this really laid an egg. And I think we'll see it this year too. We're going to see films that just might not make it at all. Last year we had Blonde, which was about Marilyn Monroe. Ana de Armas played her and got an Oscar nomination, and she was good, but the movie sucked. It was awful. And I defy you to say that you watched the whole thing. People didn't watch the whole thing. They got to the nude scenes and they shut it off. After that, it was not worth watching because the story didn't make any sense. You have like Freddie Mercury's story, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Right.
People liked it because it plays into the myth that I think has been created. So who knows? Well, I got to talk to one of those real people who's featured in Gran Turismo, which is a film about a guy who won the right to become a race car driver by playing video games. There was a competition and they, whatever. And for whatever reason, it clicked. Jan Mardenborough is his name. And he is portrayed in this film as that naive person getting into the race car business and what it meant. He's still a race car driver. And we got a chance to talk about that whole trajectory and what it was like for him and what he thinks of the guy, Archie Madekwe, who plays him, what he thought of his performance. So we have a tape here if you'd like to run it. We'll listen to what he has to say about portraying real people on screen. What is it like seeing yourself on a screen? I mean, how many people get the story of their life told in a film? It's like 0.0001% or something.
Yeah, it's surreal, really, being honest. It's even more surreal when people tell me that racing drivers that had movies based on their lives, they're no longer around anymore. They're passed away. So to be 31 years old and have your life, a chapter of your life, be told on a big screen to an audience, is rare, and in my industry, very rare. So I feel very blessed and honored that I can actually tell, a chapter of my life.
Did you feel a connection to the character? Or did you see it as somebody else?
No, it's me.
It really does feel like you. Did you have any say then in who gets to play you? Did you say, I'm going to look at these people and just see if it's...
No say directly, but I was always informed by the producers. They kept me in the loop a lot. I would be involved in all the scripts, sets as well. And I was always kept informed of who they like as an actor to play me. Apparently the casting was going on even a year before the movie was even shot.
Oh, wow.
Archie was always their number one favorite. As far as I understand, there's many different levels of casting processes, but Archie was number one from day one.
And did you like him from day one, or did you go, I don't know?
We spoke on FaceTime the moment it was announced that he'd be playing me, and as soon as I answered the call, I was in the airport at the time, and I was like, yo, this guy looks like him straight away. So that was a great start. We met in person as well a week later after that phone call, and it gave me a lot of confidence because I was happy with the script, but meeting the person for the first time face to face, it gave me even more confidence in things are going to be great because he was asking so many questions. He knew from producers as well, and our time on FaceTime and texts. But meeting somebody face to face is different, and it kind of really leveled me. Okay, I can focus on being the stunt driver and he can focus on the acting. And because we're completely aligned on this, yeah, he was the perfect person to play. He absolutely killed it.
Did he ask you a lot of questions?
Absolutely.
And what surprised you that he wanted to know?
A lot of I'm not somebody who's emotional. My sport doesn't allow it. It's sports, you have to be quite clinical. But he was asking questions about the relationships I've had with certain people within the industry, my friends, my family, just kind of pry me open, because we all have it. But he was very good at asking those questions that were so provoking and asking things which I've never really thought of before, so he can work on his craft when he's alone. He go, okay, Jan said this, and he can show that in his art on set.
How good was he at driving?
Well, he didn't have a driver's license very recently before shooting. And I think for insurance reasons, he had to pass his test. And I didn't know at the time that I think, in fact, it was that make or break, because if he didn't pass his test, we couldn't have shot. We wouldn't be shot because, I don't know, for many other reasons. But he was on a fast track course, and he passed, and he's taken an interesting part. He said his favorite brand right now is Porsche.
So is mine, but there you go.
He's got good taste.
Right.
So, if you could bring somebody, he's never been involved in lots of cars before, so it feels very nice. Man, I have a lot of respect for somebody who can go into another industry and be immersed. It's like me going into ballroom dancing or being a ballerina and like being immersed in myself in that. So I have a lot of respect for him, because he's never done this before. He had no interest in cars. Now he's the face of Gran Turismo, which is just racing cars, and he nailed it. So yeah, I've a lot of respect for that. Do that.
You know, the movie makes a big deal about, can you really make the transition from being a gamer to being a driver? Is it possible? I mean, yeah, it was possible with you, but in the grand scheme of things, was your dad really right? And you say, you know, this is going to lead to nothing. These are not going to be career connections for anybody.
Well, the movie myself answered that question. That was the question we were always asking ourselves. Can it be done? I'm proof of that.
But you're one person. And you know how kids sit around and they're playing games all day, and will it lead to something? And
that's where dreams and belief comes into it. Because if it was easy, everybody would be able to do it. What makes it feel like an accomplishment and that is hard, that is difficult, and it seems like it's not possible. Well, everything is possible. I believe that you can do anything. It's a mindset. You can't do everything, but you can certainly do anything if you set your mind to it. I never let that light of being a racing driver go out. I didn't know how I would get from A to B, but I was very much aware from a young age. I'm very headstrong as a person, even as a kid, that's what I want to do. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm not going to believe from other people that is not possible. I've spoken in the past with other people about things that I'd said growing up as a teen, where I would say a BMW was going to be my first car when I'm 17 years old. And I had my friends, because boys, they would rip into me for years about that. And I spoke to my other friends that I went to school with, and they'd seen the movie. They were at a bar, and they told me because they had a few drinks. It's much more fluid, the conversation. And they said to me, "Look, you never said to us that you wanted to be a racing driver." And I thought about it, and I was like, "You're right. I never told anybody. I never told anybody my dream, because you have to protect that. You can't walk around. I don't believe you should walk around and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, because people will call you out in it, and also it loses the energy. I believe you lose that energy. That's what I believe. So I never spoke to anybody about it. It was always my inner dream, and I believe you can do anything. So anybody watching that, the movie, I had thousands of messages from people that have taken an interest in motorsport, but also is telling me, I want to pursue my dream. They wouldn't tell me what it is, which I love. You shouldn't tell me. You shouldn't tell anybody. It's like, I'm going to pursue my dream. You inspired me to pursue my dream. And I love that, because what else do we live for? Like, why? The rules of life. We have to follow our passions, our purpose.
Well, when it does happen, how do you feel? I mean, is it like, well, now I've got to find a new dream, or, you know?
Well, in racing, it's there's no such thing as a perfect lap. So it's like an eternal chase of perfecting your craft, and it will never be perfect. So I'm still in those trenches of how can I get better as a racing driver? That's what gives me purpose. Is like, hey, I want to race here, I want to do that, and when I get there, I need to race. I want to win, I want to do my best, I want to race in other championships, level championship races. That's my drive. It's the constant, it's a mindset and a way of living is helping up better.
Sure.
Whether that be in private, whether that can be in the way that I present myself, whether I dress, or whether my business feelings, it's always try to be better.
All right, Bruce, thanks for that interview. You know, with the race car movies and biopics, what was your thought on this one compared to like something like a Ford versus Ferrari?
Well, this is one that actually had some kind of controversy about the way they messed with time, because there's a big accident that's in this film, and it has been moved from where it actually happened to a different time because it helps build tension. And look, if the guy who is, it's his story, doesn't mind, I guess I can't mind, but I think also because he's an executive producer, there might be somebody that helps say, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Well,
I enjoy the racing movies. I enjoyed Ford versus Ferrari. I thought that was a really good story to tell.
Well, this year you're getting Ferrari, so
yeah, exactly.
No Ford in there.
Exactly.
And so you have to go into every screen biography as it ain't all true.
Right. You know, it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of movies based on music, you know, with like Queen and
sure,
and you had Elton John, and the one that kind of gets looked at is almost the starting point. I mean, there's been a few others along the way, but the one that really kind of propelled, I think, the modern film was The Doors from Oliver Stone. And that's one where the three surviving members of The Doors at the time, they hated it. They worked with Oliver Stone for a while on it to try to help, you know, tell the story. And when that thing came out, they were not at all happy with the way.
And it hurt it because Val Kilmer should have gotten a Best Actor nomination.
Yeah.
He was that good. And boy, they buried it.
Yep.
And when you look at later ones, Rami Malek, you know, when you look back on that one, you're going to say, why did he win the Oscar for playing Freddie Mercury? And it all boils down to that little number he did in front of a huge crowd, because they played that thing forever before you even saw the film. And that one scene is very good, but the rest of it doesn't really back it up. And I think that's when you'll look at it and you'll say, he probably shouldn't have got it. You know,
yeah.
It wasn't all that. The Whitney Houston one, I think, is awful. And Rocket Man is good, but then when it needs to, it'll go into these kind of fantasy sequences so that then you're not really sure what's shaking, what's real, what's true, what's not.
You know, it's been an interesting series of films, and they're sort of interconnected because they're connected by almost like an individual. There's a producer, his name is Mark Ciardi. He was a baseball pitcher. He actually pitched professionally. He pitched for a season with the Milwaukee Brewers. I know the story a little bit more because when I was working in New Jersey, he's actually from New Jersey, and my newspaper that I was working for at the time did a story on him when some of his movies were making out. So he finished his baseball career. He went into, I think, modeling, and he started making Hollywood connections. And then he started telling stories through Disney, and you know them all. You know, like Miracle about the 1980 Olympic hockey team and The Rookie. And I went back and looked at, you know, I was trying to find like, you know, fact versus fiction on those. And I was having a hard time finding very much fictionalized. And I think those in general were pretty well regarded. I was looking at a story about The Rookie with Jim Morris, talking about, the portrayal of him, because he was the pitcher who blew out his arm and became a high school baseball coach, and then all of a sudden realized he could throw 98 miles per hour again, and ended up working his way back into the big leagues. And he said that the film was about 90% accurate to his real life. So it's good to see that there are some films out there, and I think I've really enjoyed those films that they've done, like Miracle, like The Rookie, because I find them, they're good, they're family friendly, they're not too over the top, but they seem to keep fairly close to historical facts.
Yeah, when it's condensing time, basically.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't happen within a year. I think they're better off when they do a slice of somebody's life, where it's like maybe 3 months of their life, and that's the movie. I think that would be the interesting kind of situation. Maestro is coming up, about Leonard Bernstein, and that should be, I think, a really good one in terms of how well they track a segment of his career. But I would hate to be the subject of a biopic, because I think that you have to kind of then live that story instead of what your own story was, because that's what people think of you. They want to have things condensed and into a neat little package that you can see in 2 hours and we're done with you and you move on. But there's much more beyond that. And I think when you look at those seminal moments, maybe that's all it should be. Ken Burns is a great one to do documentaries about famous people. But what he uses are voices of other people talking about that person. So it's almost like a print news story where you hear others making some kind of assessment, and it's not just necessarily the character saying something. So those I find the most accurate in terms of believing what I'm seeing. But again, it's filtered. History is filtered by those who are telling history.
I think the only thing that bothers me, I always know that there's going to be some creative license, some dramatization to these films, but it just irks me when they make weird changes for the sake of making changes that don't necessarily make sense. Because I remember I've never seen the Buddy Holly story with Gary Busey.
You haven't?
No, I haven't. I need to go back and watch it one of these days. But I remember a friend of mine talking about it and saying that, he liked the film, but he couldn't understand why they didn't have all the Crickets. Like Buddy Holly's backing band was the Crickets, and it was like they had like 3 of the 4 members in it, but not...
Couldn't get their rights.
Right. So it's just... like, why would you make a movie and leave out one of the band members? If there's a reason for it, I guess, somebody didn't want their story told. But if it was just more because, it gets a little unruly with 4 people, so we're going to just narrow it down to 3. To me, those are little things that to the average person may not notice. But if you're trying to also appeal to fans of the band or the musician, these are historical pieces. It's like even watching Field of Dreams, where Shoeless Joe Jackson is batting from the wrong side of the plate. It's when you make a left-handed batter right-handed or vice versa, that kind of thing. It's like little details like that when you're a fan, you're kind of going like, can't you get maybe that right? That's kind of irritating.
Now Broadway is jumping on the bandwagon, and they're doing all of these musicals about musical people. Yeah. Because they're very dramatic. They've got a built-in catalog of songs that always will work because people know them. There's a Neil Diamond one out now. There was Tina Turner. There was Cher. And you're going to see more and more of those. Mamma Mia, which was just the songs with a different story.
Right.
But they're easily tap into. How do I say that? You can easily tap into them. I think that's what I want to say. Because you already know something about them, which is the music. And I think that's a shorthand that they don't have to tell other parts of the story because you just assume that's there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's weird. But if there's a story or a moral or a caution to be added to this, it's that don't believe them. When you see a screen biography, don't believe them. They're very entertaining, but they aren't necessarily the true story.
Absolutely. That's a good point, too, to end this episode. Thank you again, Bruce, for that interview.
When Brad Pitt plays me in the movie version of the podcast,
Yes.
you know that it's going to have a different ending.
Absolutely. Yep. And again, just want to point out one last time, no animals were harmed in the recording of this podcast.
Yet.
We're all, yes. Could have a cat wander in here in a second. All right, everyone. Thank you again. Come back again next week for another episode of Streamed and Screened.
If you have sleep apnea and struggle with CPAP, consider that CPAPs were invented in 1980. Do you even remember 1980? Everyone's house had one telephone. There were like 4 TV channels. Come on. You played video games in arcades and watched movies in theaters. GPS was a folded map and a helpful gas station attendant. And social media was inviting the neighbors to come look at your vacation pictures. A lot has changed since 1980. Now, for people who struggle with CPAP, there's Inspire. Inspire is an implanted device that treats sleep apnea inside your body at the click of a remote. It's the only FDA-approved sleep apnea treatment of its kind. While you sleep, Inspire keeps you breathing normally and resting comfortably. No mask, no hose, just sleep. To learn more, visit inspiresleep.com. Inspire, sleep apnea innovation. Inspire is not for everyone. Talk to your doctor to see if it's right for you and review important safety information at inspiresleep.com.